The Holston Valley Medical Center sat on the high ground above Kingsport, Tennessee, the way hospitals sit on high ground in Appalachian towns, visible from the highway, reachable from every direction, lit up at night like a landlocked lighthouse sending its fluorescent signal across the ridgeline to anyone driving the curves of ER 26 or Route 11W, who might need to know that help was in a building on a hill. The emergency room entrance faced south, a concrete drive-through with an overhang and automatic glass doors and a row of plastic chairs outside for the smokers and the waiters and the people who had been inside long enough that the fluorescent lights had started to feel like a ceiling pressing down and needed 5 minutes of dark sky and cold air to remember what outside felt like. Garland bore gauge. Puckett pulled into the hospital parking lot at 9:40 on a Wednesday evening in late November because his riding partner, Dalton, had dropped his Heritage Softail on a gravel patch coming through Gate City, and the road rash on his forearm needed cleaning, and probably stitches, and definitely a tetanus shot, and Dalton had said, "I'm fine," and Garland had said, "You're bleeding through your shirt," and Dalton had said, "That's how I know I'm alive," and Garland had said, "Get on the bike," and they'd ridden to the ER because bikers who say they're fine are never fine, and bikers who are bleeding through their shirts are even less fine. Garland was 44 years old, 6'3", 280 pounds, and he'd spent the last 22 years of his life as a tool and die maker. The man who builds the tools that build the parts, the molds and dies and jigs and fixtures that stamp and press and form metal into the shapes that become automotive parts, appliance components, medical devices, the precise steel cavities that give shape to the shapeless. He ran Puckett Tool and Die out of Gate City, Virginia, a 3-man shop that built progressive dies, injection molds, and custom fixtures for manufacturers across Scott, Sullivan, and Washington counties. The work was microscopic. Tolerances of 1/1000th of an inch, surfaces polished to mirror finish, cavities that had to match their mating components so precisely that light couldn't pass between them. His beard was reddish-brown going gray, thick, reaching mid-chest, with a small hardened steel dowel pin, the kind used to align die halves so they mate perfectly every time, threaded through a hole on a steel cable and hanging from his right braid. His forearms were sleeved in ink. His left arm carried a progressive stamping die in cross-section, the upper and lower halves showing the punch and cavity in perfect alignment, the strip of sheet metal running through it mid-stroke, with the part being formed in stages from flat stock to finished shape. His right arm was a mold sleeve, an injection mold in cross-section showing the core and cavity and cooling channels and ejector pins, surrounded by the components of mold making, EDM electrodes, surface grinders, and polishing stones. His knuckles were tattooed in block letters, form on the left, hold on the right, because form and hold is what a die does. It gives shape and it maintains it under pressure, and the quality of the hold determines whether the part comes out right or comes out wrong. He wore a black leather vest with the die-set MC center patch, a punch and die in cross-section with a mountain ridge behind it, his treasurer diamond, and a small pin on his breast pocket machined from D2 tool steel in the shape of a dowel pin. Subscribe to Asphalt Angels and hit that notification bell, because this story starts with a girl standing outside an emergency room with a suitcase, and the reason nobody came to get her is the reason you won't forget this story. The Die Set MC had been founded in 2012 by Garland and 4 other tool and die makers in Scott County, Virginia, men who built precision tools that shaped metal into exact forms and rode imprecise roads that shaped nothing and shook everything and found balance in the contradiction between the two. The club had grown to 14 members across Scott, Sullivan, and Washington counties, all of them men who worked in the trade, die makers, mold makers, fixture builders, the men who build the negative spaces that give positive shapes to everything manufactured. The club's philosophy was drawn directly from the trade. The die determines the part. A perfect die makes a perfect part every single time. A flawed die makes a flawed part every single time. The flaw doesn't fix itself. The flaw repeats. Garland walked Dalton into the ER at 9:45. The waiting room was half full. The Wednesday night population of minor emergencies and chronic conditions, and the particular kind of patients that ER waiting rooms cultivate in people who have nowhere else to go at this hour. He got Dalton checked in, sat in the waiting room, and pulled out his phone. At 10:15, he walked outside for air. The overhang, the plastic chairs, the November cold. There was a girl. She was standing at the edge of the overhang, where the concrete met the parking lot, at the line between the fluorescent light from the ER entrance and the dark of the lot. She was maybe 12 years old. She was wearing a coat, a puffy winter coat, purple, zipped to her chin, and jeans and sneakers. Her hair was in a braid that had come loose at the bottom. She was holding a suitcase, not a duffel bag, not a backpack, a suitcase. A hard shell roller, the kind adults use for weekend trips, gray, the handle extended, her right hand on the handle. She was standing still. She was looking at the parking lot. She was watching cars come and go, and the cars were coming and going, and none of them were stopping for her. "You waiting for someone?" "Yes." "Okay." Garland sat in one of the plastic chairs. He lit a cigarette. The girl stood at the edge of the overhang. The ER doors opened and closed behind them. People going in, people coming out, the automatic rhythm of a building that never stops admitting and discharging and admitting again. 10 minutes passed. No car pulled up. No one came out of the ER looking for her. No one called her name. "How long you been out here?" "Since 6. 6 o'clock. "Yes, sir. It's 10:15. "I know." 4 hours and 15 minutes. A 12-year-old girl had been standing outside an emergency room with a suitcase for 4 hours and 15 minutes, and nobody had come to get her. Nobody from inside the ER had come out to check on her. Nobody pulling into the lot had stopped. Nobody leaving had asked. 4 hours of standing at the edge of an overhang in November, watching headlights sweep across a parking lot, and none of the headlights belonging to the person she was waiting for. If this story has touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to Asphalt Angels. Because a girl had been standing outside an emergency room for over 4 hours with a suitcase, and the person she was waiting for was never coming. "Who are you waiting for?" "My mom." "Is she inside?" "She was. She was admitted this morning. They told me to wait. They said someone would come get me." "Who said?" "The nurse, when they took my mom back. I was in the waiting room, and my mom went back, and the nurse said, 'Someone will come get you, honey. Just wait right here.' And I waited. And then visiting hours ended, and they said I couldn't stay in the waiting room overnight, so I came outside. And I've been outside since 6. If you're watching this story, hit that hype button right now. It's free, takes 1 second, and helps these stories reach the people who need them. Now, back to the story. The girl's name was Peyton Schul. She was 12. Her mother, Renee Schul, 34, had driven herself to Holston Valley Medical Center at 8 a.m. that morning. Wednesday morning, a school day. Except Peyton hadn't gone to school because Renee had woken up at 6 a.m. with chest pains and shortness of breath, and had sat on the edge of the bed for 2 hours, deciding whether the symptoms were real or imagined, and the deciding had lasted until the pain moved to her left arm and the decision was made for her. She'd put Peyton in the car and driven to the ER and checked in, and been triaged and been taken back, and Peyton had been in the waiting room since 8:30 a.m. Renee was admitted at 11 a.m. The chest pains were from a cardiac event, not a heart attack, but a warning, the kind of warning that the body sends when the electrical system is misfiring and the muscle is working harder than it should, and the stress that caused the overwork is not the stress of exercise or exertion, but the stress of being 34 and raising a daughter alone and working 2 jobs and sleeping 4 hours a night, and the body keeping score of every hour of sleep not taken, and every meal skipped, and every moment of rest replaced by motion. When Renee was admitted, the ER nurse told Peyton that someone would come get her. The nurse assumed there was someone, a father, a grandparent, an aunt, a neighbor, someone in the architecture of this child's life who would receive a call and drive to the hospital and take the child home. The nurse made the assumption because the assumption is standard. There's always someone. Except there wasn't always someone. Renee was a single mother. Peyton's father, Darrell Schul, had left when Peyton was 3, and his current address was unknown, and his phone number had been disconnected for 2 years, and his absence was so complete that Peyton didn't remember his face, and the picture of him she kept was not in a frame on a shelf, but in a box in a closet with other things that used to matter. Renee's mother was dead. 4 years, cancer. Renee's father was in a care facility in Johnson City with advanced dementia. Renee's sister, Jolene, lived in Nashville, 4 hours west. Jolene had been called. Jolene had said she'd come. Jolene hadn't come. Jolene had texted at 3 p.m. Stuck at work, trying to get coverage, might not make it tonight. Might not make it. The might was a door left open so that the failure to arrive could be attributed to circumstance rather than choice. Jolene had not texted again. Peyton had waited in the ER waiting room from 8:30 a.m. until 6 p.m., 9.5 hours. She'd eaten a bag of chips from the vending machine at noon and a candy bar at 3. She'd used the bathroom 4 times. She'd sat in the same chair, the one by the window, the one where she could see the parking lot, the one where she'd been watching for a car she recognized for 9.5 hours. At 6, the volunteer at the desk had told her the waiting room was closing for the night shift transition, and she'd need to wait outside or in the main lobby. Peyton had gone outside because outside was where the parking lot was, and the parking lot was where the car would arrive, and standing at the edge of the overhang was the closest she could be to the moment of arrival without being in the lot itself. She had the suitcase because Renee had packed it. That morning, in the bedroom, between the chest pains and the car, Renee had pulled a suitcase from the closet and packed Peyton's things: clothes, toiletries, school uniform, the stuffed rabbit she'd had since she was 2, a folder with Peyton's birth certificate, an insurance card, and school enrollment papers. The suitcase was packed the way a mother packs when she knows she might not come home that day and the child needs to be portable, ready to go with whoever comes to get her. The suitcase was the plan. The plan assumed someone was coming. The plan failed at 3 p.m. when Jolene texted, "might not make it," and failed completely when night fell and the parking lot emptied and the girl was still standing at the edge of the overhang with a suitcase packed by a mother who was upstairs in a hospital bed, and a father who was nowhere, and a grandmother who was dead, and a grandfather who didn't remember her name, and an aunt who was stuck at work. "Peyton, is there anyone else? Anyone who can come get you?" "No. There's my mom's friend Donna, but I don't have Donna's number. My mom has it in her phone, and her phone's upstairs. And Aunt Jolene said she might come, but she said that 6 hours ago, and she's not here, so she's not coming. And that's it. That's everyone. There's no one else. That's everyone. There's no one else." 2 sentences that describe the total population of a 12-year-old girl's safety net, and the population was 1 aunt who wasn't coming, and 1 friend whose number was on a phone in a hospital room upstairs, and 0 other people. Garland put out his cigarette. He stood up. He walked inside to the ER front desk. "There's a 12-year-old girl outside with a suitcase. She's been out there since 6 o'clock. Her mother was admitted this morning. Nobody came to get her. Nobody called anyone to check on her. She's been standing in the parking lot for 4 hours. She's 12. It's November. How is nobody tracking this? The nurse looked at him. The look was the look of a person who has been inside a system that processes emergencies in the order of medical severity, and a child standing outside with a suitcase is not a medical emergency and not inside the system, and therefore invisible to the system. The nurse said, "I'll contact social services. You'll contact them now." "Sir, now." Garland texted the die-set group chat. Holston Valley Medical Center, Kingsport. 12-year-old girl standing outside the ER with a suitcase since 6 p.m. Mom admitted this morning. Dad gone. Grandparents gone. Aunt didn't show. Hospital didn't track her. She's been standing out here in November for 4 hours, and nobody asked. Need brothers. GPS pin. Punch responded first. Vice President, injection mold maker. 7 minutes. Then stamp from Gate City. Then press and draw together from Weber City. Then blank from Duffield. 5 riders. If Asphalt Angels has become part of your week, consider joining the channel membership. Just a couple bucks a month keeps these stories coming. Links below. Now, back to the ending. Social Services was contacted at 10:25 p.m. A caseworker was dispatched, 40 minutes out from the regional office. The Sullivan County Sheriff was contacted to provide a welfare check. A deputy arrived at 10:40. Peyton told the deputy everything: the morning, the chest pains, the drive, the waiting room, the 9.5 hours, the nurse who said someone would come, the volunteer who said she had to leave, the parking lot, the headlights that weren't the right headlights, the suitcase her mother had packed, the aunt who said, might not. The deputy documented it. The deputy also documented something else. The hospital had no record of contacting anyone about Peyton after Renee was admitted. No social work referral. No notification to Child Protective Services. No welfare check. A 12-year-old girl had been in the ER waiting room for 9.5 hours, and then outside the ER for 4 more hours, and the system had processed her mother's cardiac event and failed to process her mother's child. The caseworker arrived at 11:05. Jolene was called again, at 11:10 p.m. by the caseworker, with the weight of an official call rather than a family text. Jolene answered. Jolene said she'd drive tonight. She left Nashville at 11:30. She arrived at Holston Valley at 3:15 a.m., 17 hours after Renee had been admitted, and Peyton had been waiting since 8:30 in the morning. 17 hours. A child had existed in the space between a hospital that processed patients and a family that processed good intentions, and neither system had processed the child. Jolene walked into the hospital lobby at 3:15 a.m. Peyton was in the lobby now. The caseworker had moved her inside, into a family consultation room with a couch and a blanket, and a vending machine sandwich that Peyton had eaten in 4 bites, because the last food she'd had was a candy bar at 3 p.m., and it was 3 a.m., and 12 hours is a long time between meals for a 12-year-old who weighs 90 pounds and who had been standing in a parking lot for 4 of those hours. Jolene walked in. She looked at Peyton on the couch with the blanket and the suitcase next to her, and the empty sandwich wrapper on the table. She looked at the suitcase, the gray hard-shell roller that Renee had packed that morning between chest pains, the suitcase that contained everything Peyton needed to be portable, to be picked up, to be taken home by someone, anyone. The suitcase that was the plan, and the plan had waited 17 hours for execution. I'm sorry, baby. I'm so sorry. Work. I couldn't get coverage. You texted at 3. You said might not. It's 3 in the morning. Might not means not. You could have said not at 3, and I would have known. But you said might, and the might kept me standing because might means maybe, and maybe means wait, and I waited. I waited from 3 until now. That's 12 hours of might. Jolene's face broke. The sentence, 12 hours of might, was the sentence of a child who had calculated the exact cost of a conditional word and had found the cost to be 12 hours of standing in a parking lot watching headlights that weren't hers. Jolene held her. Peyton let herself be held, but the hold was different from the hold in other stories. It was the hold of a person who has been waiting too long and whose body has passed through the stage of wanting to be held and into the stage of allowing it, which is not the same thing. The Die-Set MC of Scott County, Virginia, now sponsors a program called Waiting Room Watch. In partnership with hospitals and emergency departments across Scott, Sullivan, and Washington counties, they provide a volunteer presence in ER waiting rooms, members and volunteers who track unaccompanied minors and ensure that when a parent is admitted, the child is not processed as an afterthought. The program installs a simple checklist at every ER triage desk. Patient has minor children? Where are they? Who is coming? When? The checklist takes 30 seconds. The absence of the checklist took 17 hours. Peyton Shull is 13 now. She lives with Jolene in Nashville. The move happened in January. Peyton finished the semester in Kingsport, said goodbye to her school friends, and rode with Jolene the 4 hours west on I-40 with the gray suitcase in the back seat, and the suitcase was packed for the last time as an emergency bag and unpacked for the first time as a real suitcase containing real belongings going to a real room in a real house where someone was expecting her. Jolene had the room ready, painted it lavender because Peyton had mentioned once in a phone call that she liked lavender, and Jolene had remembered, because Jolene was learning that showing up isn't just about driving 4 hours. It's about hearing a color mentioned in a phone call and painting a wall before the child arrives, so the child walks in and sees a room that was prepared for her, and the preparation is the proof that someone was thinking about her before she got there. Renee recovered. The cardiac event was managed with medication and lifestyle changes, and the 2 jobs became 1 job, and the 4 hours of sleep became 6, and the body stopped keeping score because the body was finally being given what it was owed. She calls Peyton every night at 8. Every night, not most nights, every night. Because Renee learned on a Wednesday in November that the word might costs 12 hours of standing in a parking lot, and the word every costs nothing and means everything. Peyton visits once a month. Jolene drives her every time on time, because Jolene learned on a Wednesday in November that might not make it is a sentence that a 12-year-old girl will calculate the exact cost of, and the cost was a parking lot, and 4 hours and a suitcase, and the fluorescent edge of an overhang where the light meets the dark. Peyton still has the suitcase. She doesn't use it for trips. She keeps it in her closet in Nashville, packed, not with clothes, but with the folder, the birth certificate, the insurance card, the school papers, the things that make a child portable. She told her therapist, "My mom packed that suitcase because she knew someone needed to come get me, and the suitcase was how I'd be ready. But nobody came. The suitcase was ready. I was ready. Nobody else was. So I keep it packed, because if I'm ready next time, maybe next time someone will be ready too." Her therapist asked her what it felt like to stand for 4 hours watching headlights. Peyton said, "Every car that pulled in, I thought this is the one. Every car that wasn't the one, I stayed. Because the alternative to staying was leaving, and leaving meant giving up on might." Jolene said might. Might means maybe. Maybe means wait. "I waited for 12 hours on a 2-letter word, and the word wasn't even the truth. The truth was not. She should have said not. Not hurts, but not takes 5 seconds. Might takes 12 hours. Garland still rides past Holston Valley on Route 11W. The ER entrance still has the overhang and the plastic chairs and the automatic doors that open and close with the rhythm of a building that never stops admitting and discharging. And every time he passes, he looks at the edge of the overhang, the line where the fluorescent light meets the dark of the parking lot, the line where Peyton stood for 4 hours with a suitcase and watched headlights that weren't hers. And he checks for someone standing there, because the last time he checked, there was a 12-year-old girl with a packed suitcase who had been standing in that exact spot since 6 o'clock on a November evening, and the hospital had processed every emergency in every room, on every floor, except the one standing outside the front door. The system had a checklist for cardiac events, and a checklist for trauma, and a checklist for allergic reactions, and no checklist for a child with a suitcase. The checklist takes 30 seconds. The absence of the checklist took 17 hours. Be the one who checks. Thank you for watching this story. If it reminded you that a child outside an ER is still an emergency, please share it. Subscribe to Asphalt Angels for more stories proving that sometimes the person who needs saving isn't inside the hospital. Tell us in the comments. What would you do if you saw a girl standing alone outside the ER with a suitcase?